Okay, can somebody confirm you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you, Kayla. Before we begin, are there any questions? Before I begin, let me go to the grade book, actually. Need that open. Probably don't need that open, but I'll leave it. I'm not sharing my screen, am I? No. So I graded two of the extra credit assignments, extra credit study 2 and extra credit study 3. I hope to get extra study credit study 4 graded soon, maybe tonight or tomorrow night. I got worksheet lecture 3 and worksheet lecture 4 graded. And then I did the grading to worksheet lab 4 and maybe finish the grading to worksheet lab 3. Any questions about the grading? For lab 4, you have until October 25th, this Saturday, to submit the lab again for a second grading if you did not get 100%. I mean, if you didn't get a 5. Lab 3, let me check on that.
I have a question about Lab 4 with the
Uh-huh.
case studies. For the answers for those, would they only be in like the lab handouts, or do we need to reference the book too, or is that something we're supposed to look up online?
I think the material is in the lab manual, but I'm not 100% certain. So let me look up lab 4. Um, um, for lab 4, I know the case study 2 can be obtained from the table in the lab module. Let me look up for case
Okay,
study 1.
that was mainly my question.
Okay. All right. I think it's from the lab module, but I'm not 100% certain on case study 1. Let me look that one up just because I do not know myself. We got to call up the lab module here just a minute. Oh, no, that is it. All right, never mind. So the acid fast stain is discussed and mycobacteria is discussed. Yeah, it comes from the lab module, at least for this case studies. Didn't know I made any changes. All right. Um, I think that's it with the grading. Are there any questions about the grading? Let me remind you, you have a quiz this Wednesday. Let me see what the quiz will cover. Well, I'll actually get out of the grade book first. Now I can share my screen. So the quiz will cover, quiz 2 will cover chapter 3 and the end of chapter 2. And it also covers lab 3 and lab 4. Any questions about anything? What we're going to do today is discuss and start the unknown project. Close that down because my computer is overworking at the moment. It always does when it's making the oh, maybe it finished. Let me see if that's going on with Zoom. Come on. I'm going to stop the share here so I can get at the Zoom. All right, looks like it's fine. It looks like we are finishing the lecture file, so I'm all right. All right, let's talk about the unknown project. You should have taken a look at the unknown instructions, at least looked at it. I think I've got that out here already. This is a 75-point lab project. Today we're going to start the unknown project. What I'm going to do is send you a number, and the number will represent a species of bacteria. So everything we do on this project will be online, but I'm going to send you a number, and the number will be representing one of these gram-negative cells here, or one of these gram-positive cells here. So you each get a number representing one of these cells. You won't know which one it is, and you will all term long for the rest of the term try and run various tests to try and figure out which unknown species you have. And the various tests you can run are up here. The names of the tests. There are a few others, and you can also see the unknown tests right here under week 5 lab, unknown tests. Oh, that reminds me, I need to tell the other labs something. Let me write this down. This is an important part. I remembered to tell you guys. That is, when you do the gram stain, you should not do the cellular growth arrangement from the gram stain. Looking for a piece of paper to write on. And that does tell you in both the table and in the gram stain. So let's go ahead and look at the gram stain since I have this here. Cell shape and arrangement. Come on. Oop, goofed. Oh well. So it goes through the gram stain. Talking about the gram stain. Cell shape and arrangement, spheres, rods, helical, or spirillum. The arrangements for gram-positive and gram-negative cells. Come on. Canvas is not quite working correctly. If you haven't noticed, it's working mostly, but if you didn't notice on Sunday, Canvas was shut down around most of the United States, including at Clark College. You couldn't get in. Let's see about the growth arrangement here. Let me blow this up. So it tells you, in practice, it's usually difficult to determine whether gram-positive cocci are in clusters or chains when viewed in the gram stain. This is because chains are broken apart during the production of a smeared slide in the gram stain, and because 10 cells tend to be brought together in artificial clumps as the water evaporates from a slide as it dried. Therefore, streptococci often end up looking like they are clusters, and clusters can look like streptococci. So do not rely on the cellular growth arrangement from the gram stain. If you want to know the cellular growth arrangement, you should do the cellular growth arrangement test, which I'll show you in a little bit. And then it tells you the steps you do for making the gram stain. Come on. Sorry, the canvas isn't working. I can't scroll down even any further than here. But I can mouse down, so um, go through the procedure of the gram stain, and then showing you some gram-positive diplococci, which I'm not going to blow up. You can blow it up. Gram-positive staphylococci, gram-positive streptococci, that one I can actually see. Gram-negative bacilli, gram-negative bacilli. One thing it does tell you is when you can view this, and it does tell you that you can view the slide after you make it so that you can get the results of the gram stain immediately after you do the gram stain. Now let me show you where the cellular growth arrangement is. We have a cell growth arrangement test. It's right here. Cellular growth arrangement generally cannot be determined from the gram stain. Why? It's right there. It tells you the main cellular growth arrangements. And then how to get the cellular growth arrangement. You have to grow your cells in a liquid culture and then use like a wet mount to take the broth and put it on the slide. Gently smear some loop foils onto the slide. Allow the slide to air dry. That's not required, but you can. And then gently heat fix it. And then stain them and then view them under the microscope. And then you can see the cellular growth arrangement. So you have to do the cellular growth arrangement test to get the cellular growth arrangement. If you get the cellular growth arrangement from the gram stain, you may be incorrect on what you see. Any questions about any of that? I'm glad I remembered that for you guys. I've got to tell the first lab about that. All right. Let's go back now. Oop, can't. There we go. So if you request a test here, you should read what the test is, and then when you'll get the test result. Like methyl red, I get students almost every term requesting the test, and then they ask, when am I getting the test results? I requested it 5 days ago. And I reply back that the methyl red test takes 5 days to incubate. So you're not getting your results before 5 days. And you can look at it for 2 days, but if you do for 2 days, meaning 5 days, and your results are negative, you then have to repeat the test and grow it for 5 days. So generally, I just grow it for 5 days, and then you don't have to ever repeat the test. All right, so here are the different tests. Oops, why did I lose that? See, like I said, Canvas isn't working incorrectly. I'm not even sure how to scroll down here. Okay, this will do it. So these are some other tests. Most of the tests are on the table, but I'm not sure that that test is there. I'm not sure that the growing on McConkey's auger is in the table. I think all the others are. And then most of the other tests are here that you can run. So you need to run various tests to determine what species of bacteria your number is representing.
I have a
Uh,
question.
yeah,
Some of those have dashes. Does that mean that, like, can every single test be ran by your species, or can
if you want
some?
to,
Okay.
you won't need more than probably 5 or 6 tests to identify your species. An unlucky student might get 7 tests, but that should be all you'd need to do. You don't need to do all of them. You could if you wanted to. I once had a student do all of them many years ago. Um, if you do unnecessary tests, you will be deducted in the grading, and I'll talk about that when I'm talking about the grading. Um, Lost my train of thought here. Just a minute. Let me get to the instructions. So this is a 75-point lab project where you're going to be identifying your unknown species. You won't be given a bacteria because everything we do is online. You'll be given a number that represents a bacteria species. You will also be given 3 tests at the beginning that I choose, not you. And that's because I went through this um, test and realized I've got 40 students. If each one requires 6 tests for this one project, this will require 240 interactions for one project by me. Obviously, you guys will have, what, 6 requests on average? And so I spoke to the other instructors and said, that's too much for one project. How about if I pick the first 3 tests for you, in which case I will then send out one email to everyone with their number and then the test results for the 3 tests. And that will be 40 students times 3. And instead of sending out 120 things to students, I'll be only sending out one. That'll reduce my contact with you guys by 120, which makes this project doable. Any question about any of that? It's going to be a lot on my part because I'm still going to have 120, but it's doable. The first 3 tests that I'm going to choose for you are the gram stain. That's a very good test because it'll separate all the bacteria into either gram positive or gram negative. So you get a split right off the bat of 50% of your possibilities. I'm going to do the gelatin test because that's the longest test. This test needs to incubate for a minimum of 1 week before you can get results. And then I'll do the PR lactose test just because it's a good test for most students. So if you get gram negative, and then the gelatin negative, these will be the species of bacteria that are under consideration, meaning what your unknown number could be. And then PR lactose, let's say the conclusion is it's AG. That narrows it down to 4 species, these 4 right there. And then you would have to pick a test for determining what you want to do next. You could do 6.5% sodium chloride broth, in which case you'll separate it up maybe into 1 or 4. You could do the urease test, maybe separate it into 2 out of 4. The problem is these are variable. That's what the V stands for. Scroll down here. Variable, which means sometimes they can be positive, sometimes they can be negative. So if you get a plus there, you narrowed it down. But if you get a negative, then you still have the same four. A better test might be this one here, methyl red. Another better test, VP test, where at least you'll narrow it down to 1/3. Citrate, another possibility. You'll narrow it down to 3 plus 1 negative. What else do we have here? TSI is a possibility. Any questions about any of that? And then after you get that test done, let's say you run VP test and it's positive, so you narrowed it down to these two. Remember, a variable can be plus or minus, and I'm saying the VP plus was positive. You narrowed it down to these two. Now you have to find a test to separate these two. That's a possibility. Methyl red won't work. This is a possibility. That's a possibility. And it looks like you're going to have to work with a test to separate these two, one that's going to have variable results. Any question about that? So if you do the Esculin test and it's negative, you narrowed it down to this one. But if it's positive, you haven't narrowed it down. It's still one of these two. So that's how you do the variable or the V. Any questions about any of that? Let's talk about the AG. We need to look at the PR lactose test. Come up here. And we see there is no PR lactose test. All we have is PR carbohydrate. Let me open that. PR carbohydrate. Broth is the PR glucose test, the PR lactose test, the PR sucrose test, the PR mannitol test, the PR inulin, or some other carbohydrate, PR carbohydrate. There will be a single fermentable carbohydrate in the tube. It could be glucose, lactose, sucrose, mannitol, inulin, or some other carbohydrate. For the PR lactose test, it'll be lactose. It has the pH indicator and a Durham tube inverted in the big tube or the broth. Let me show you a picture there. So there is the inverted Durham tube. And then it's got the results. You can get AG, acid and gas being produced. You can get A, just acid, no gas being produced. And then you can get no evidence of fermentation, and that's a negative. There's the procedure there. And this test needs 18 to 48 hours before you will get results, meaning it needs to incubate for 18 to 48 hours. Any question about any of that? So if you ask for the test, you're not going to get the results for at least 18 hours. And this is a negative test where the test doesn't change color. It's either red or pinkish in color. No gas in the inverted Durham tube. This is acid and gas. If it's yellow, then it's acid because the fermentation has made an acidic product, and that will make the pH indicator turn yellow. If there's gas being produced from the fermentation, the gas will create a bubble in the inverted Durham tube. And so this one is acid and gas, or AG. Any question about PR lactose test? Well, all right, this is a time-honored part of most microbiology courses where you're figuring out what the unknown species of bacteria is. I will give you a number and the results of the first three tests next Tuesday. You will then take a look at the results and figure out which test to request, and you will do that in your unknown notes pages. Scroll up here, click on the unknown notes page. You will have a download or upload page where you can upload a document. I think you can directly type in here too. Yeah, you can do text entry or you can upload a document. It has to be one of these types: doc, docx, RTX, rich text format, text, PDF, or HTML. Um, Most word processors can save it as a rich text format. So if you, that's not right. That should be rich text F. Um, so if you don't have access to Microsoft Word, you can use RTF. Another one I'll let you do is Write. Um, Write is what is that? Simple Word document on yours. Is it MS Word? WordPad. WordPad saves it as Write dot WRI. So that would be okay too. And no wonder I haven't seen rich text format. I didn't have the initials right there. So let's save that. You can upload as many documents as you want. Please do not use the comment sections. I will use the comment sections, and I'm going to shut this down to show you what one looks like. But I got to remove the student's grade because it's going to be from an earlier term. And that's why I'm not allowing you to see what's going on. I'm going to open up an unknown notes page that actually has something in it. But I want to remove their grade because this is a previous term and they were graded. All right. So let me share you the screen now. This is a page from an earlier student. Good. That's actually, oops, go ahead and hide the student's name even. Oh, well, tried. Yeah, put it there. Nope, I can't. So she has many different documents. One, two, three, four, five. Let's go May 15th. On this date, she put the no, she started the gelatin hydrolysis test on 5/6, started the gram stain on 5/13. Not seeing the third one. She didn't do the third one. And then put up the results I sent to her. So you can see the cells look purple and spheres. So that's the result and observation. And she stated the purple cell shape is coccus. So that's the result. And then the interpretation is gram negative. And then she has the gelatin hydrolysis test, starting 5/6, the gram stain 5/13. And the results probably on 5/13. And there's the results of the gelatin test. The second tube shows a positive result because the gelatin has remained a liquid. And then she put the next test request. She's requesting the Cadley's test. Make sure when you request a test, it is at the bottom of your document you're submitting or the top of the document. I'll see it at the top of the document. I actually will look at the bottom of the document for your test request because it should be on the bottom of the document. If you put your test request inside the document, I may not see it until I read the document. And I promise you, I will be scanning the bottom of the document at least every other day, except for Sunday, maybe not Saturday. So that means if you submit your request on Friday after I've already looked at the unknown notes on Friday, I may not see your test request until Monday because I will not check on Sunday and I may not check on Saturday. On some Saturdays I will, on some Saturdays I will not. But at least every other day I will check the bottom of the document as well as the top of the document for a test request. If you put it in the middle of the document, you're going to have to wait until I actually read the document. And I will not be doing that every other day. I may only be reading them about every week. Any question about that? Do not put anything in the comments. I will put my comments in the comment. I gave her the results for the catalase test here, the results for the nitrate test there, the results of the citrate test there, the results of the pigment test there, and I made a comment here to her about the cell growth arrangement. If you put a comment in here, I'll ask you to remove it, and if you don't remove it within a few days, I will delete it. So if you put something in a comment, it's not going to stay. I will ask you to move that comment into the document. And you can put any comment you want in the document. Any question about any of that? Anyways, that's how you do the unknown notes page. Let's go here. Your unknown note page should have the all of the activities for this project, other than possibly the first one or two emails from me, meaning I will email the class one document which will contain your unknown number and your result for the 3 tests that I'm sending. Have I told you what tests I'm sending you? I think I did. Yeah,
Yes, you
there's the
did.
gelatin hydrolysis and the PR lactose test. And then you're going to request usually one test because this project is going to be following dichotomous logic, which means you separate all the possibilities down into one of two possibilities and go through it that way. And I'm doing it initially on the dichotomous logic because you're starting the gelatin hydrolysis test. Oops, didn't mean to do that. You're starting the gelatin hydrolysis test today because this test takes 7 days. You'll then do the PR lactose test on Monday. And then on Tuesday, you're going to do the gram stain. And on Tuesday, I'll send you the results for all 3 tests that you've done. So you're doing one test after the other. It's just I'm going to send all the information together. So instead of sending you 3 emails, I'm going to send you 1 or maybe 4 because I've got your unknown number in there as well. Any question about any of that? By dichotomous logic, let me talk about that a little bit. The project should be using dichotomous logic where you're separating out the possibilities into 1 to about 2 possibilities. So the gram stain, they do the grams test, and it can be either gram positive or gram negative. The gram negative are shown here, and we're crossing them out because it's not a possibility. The gram test is gram positive. And then they did the catalase test, and it's two possibilities, catalase negative or catalase positive. The catalase negative are here, 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 and here, maybe one more. Yep, here. So these are crossed out because it's not catalase negative, it's catalase positive, and that narrows it down to these four. They then did the PR mannitol test, and it's PR mannitol negative. The PR mannitol positive are crossed out. So that would be that species, that species, that species, that species, that species, that species, and that species. And this is the only one of importance. So that crosses out Staphylococcus aureus. So that leaves us down with these three. Then there's the PR glucose test, and it's PR glucose acid, narrowing it down to these two. Um, Micrococcus luteus is not PR glucose acid, it's PR glucose negative. And then they did the citrate test, and it's citrate positive, narrowing it down to this one. This species was citrate negative. And so that's doing dichotomous logic, essentially running one test after the other. If you don't use dichotomous logic, you'll get a penalty, meaning I will allow it, but this project is supposed to use dichotomous logic. You can read about the rationale. The project format, everything is going to be done virtually, so you won't be working with any cultures, but you do need to request different tests other than the three tests I've decided for you at the very start. And I'm going to give you one number, which will be a pure culture, but you should virtually go through the steps you use that we do in the lab. And that is, in the lab, we actually give students a test tube containing two species of bacteria. So you need to streak it out, going through two colony isolation events, so that you have a very high probability that you have a pure culture. And then set up the stock culture from your pure culture, and then use the pure culture or the stock culture for all your future test results. So this project uses dichotomous logic. You should record everything you do on your unknown project in your unknown notes. And that does include the information I sent to you. And I've got what you should have in your unknown notes here. After the first one or two emails from me, every contact between you and I on the unknown project will be in your unknown notes page. And you should put up your results and conclusions for the first three tests I send you, as well as the dates that the tests were started, in your unknown notes pages. And then you should also put the species under consideration in your unknown notes page. You may include your thoughts on the time for this project at the time of this project. You should record species under consideration. Everything you do on the unknown project should be recorded here. So everything is all in one place, and that'll make it easy for you and for I to look up what you've done in your unknown notes, in your unknown project, because it's all in your unknown notes page. You can write the unknown notes page as formal, as this student did here. And if you do it formal, you can do it informal if you wish. You can just copy from your unknown notes pages and then submit it into your unknown report. You might need to add the days because it looks like she got the results on May 15th. Let's go to the very last one here. See how she did this. Okay, so she's got everything put together in the last document, meaning what she did was for each day, she just added on another day. So day 2 followed day 1. etc., etc. And she's got all her information here, in which case she can just copy this whole document and then stick it in the unknown report. And that'll be a large part of the unknown report, not all of the unknown report, but a large part of it. If you use informal writing, which is fine, you're not using bullets, you're not putting a date, you're just speaking in slang, speaking in shorthand, that's fine. Um, just realize that when you write your unknown notes, it can be informal, but your unknown report must be formal. So if you use formal in your unknown notes, you can just copy that information into your unknown report. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? Oh, like I said, you should have all this information in your unknown notes pages. The unknown notes page will be graded. It will count as a lab, 5 points. So do a good job on it. You should put in your results and your conclusions. The result is your observation. The tube was yellow. That is an observation. The conclusion is um, the PR lactose test was acid or A. So that's the conclusion. Any question about any of that? So you should have both the results and your conclusion in the unknown notes pages. If you only put one, you'll get a penalty because you're supposed to have two. And you should differentiate between your observation and the interpretation of that observation. The interpretation is your conclusion, your observation is the results. Any question about your unknown notes pages? All right, let me shut this down. I'm going to put the grade back in that student's unknown notes pages. Save it and then shut it down. Close that down. Nope, that's us. Sorry. Don't want to shut that down. Where's the other one? I must have shut it down already. Well, I guess I can shut this one down too. Yeah, that's the one that was to the last term or the term before. I don't know which term it was. Um, that's fall 2025, so that's good. All right. Let's go back to the project. Let me share my screen. So, your daily lab notes should be in your unknown notes where you write your detailed notes of your activities, your observations, your thoughts, and everything you do with this lab project. You should also write in there the species under consideration and writing up the unknown report. Like I said, it should be formal. You should write your report up in 12-point font. You should be using single space. If you use smaller than 12-point font, I'll have trouble reading it. If you don't notice, I've got reading glasses. So please make it 12-point font or larger. And then in your unknown notes, you should give your daily test that you run, the date that you request the test, the date you got the results on, the information you hope to gain from the test, the observations you made from the test, and the conclusions you made from the test. Do not omit data to make the project look better. Drawings, photos, and tables are helpful, but they're not required. When you state a test, all you need to do is state the test, like the gram stain. You do not need to write down the steps of each test you run. I know the steps of each test. So you just need to state the test that you ran. The thoughts and words in your report should be your own. If they are not, they should be put in quotes and state where you got it from in an in-text citation, and then put that in the full references. Occasionally, students quote from me. That's all right. You can quote from the my Canvas website. You can quote from the lab module. You can quote from any other textbook, like the textbook, your microbiology textbook. But if you do, put it in quotes, say where you got it from in an in-text, and then put that as a full reference in the paper. For the unknown report, it is mandatory you include a table outlining the process you used to identify your unknown organism. You can put this in a table or in a chart, meaning you can draw a chart or something and submit it. Here you're seeing a table format where the person started with all these species and narrowed it down to these species using these, oops, sorry, come on, where is it? Using these tests to identify the species. Any questions about any of that? You must also have a microorganism paragraph near the end of your report discussing your microorganism, including the diseases it causes, modes of transmission, common sources, places it's found, some treatments for the species, and any other interesting information you find about the organism. And then you should give a full reference for where you got the microorganism paragraph. So everyone should have at least one full reference for where you got the information for your microorganism paragraph. And if you have any in-text citations, those should be in the full references also. You can use whatever format style you want. The microorganism paragraph only needs to be a paragraph or two in length. Do not exceed over a half a page for, well, it looks like I said one type page for this section. The report should be a certain length. I think it should be about 5 pages. Anything less than 4, you'll get a penalty. There's another thing I need to talk about to the first lab. Anything less than 4, you'll get a penalty. Anything more than 6, you'll also get a penalty. So it should be about 5 pages long, and that's in here someplace. That includes the text of your document. It does not include any pictures, tables, or the references, the 4 to 6 pages of single space text.
So would you recommend us typing up everything first into the 5 pages and then adding the pictures and tables at the end?
It's up to you, however you want to do it. If you're concerned about not being 4 to 6 pages, then yes. Because, like I said, the tables and pictures and the references don't count in the 4 to 6. I don't usually have a problem with the student making it 4 to 6 pages. Occasionally, someone gives a really short report, in which case they get a penalty. I've only had 1 or 2 students give a very lengthy project, like about 10 pages. And it shouldn't be that long. It should be 4 to 6 pages. Something that'll help if it's too long is you might be discussing the test, and all you need to do is state the gram stain. You don't have to tell me how you did the gram stain. or any other test for that matter. Just tell me the test. Um, all right. The project will be tested for plagiarism, meaning you need to submit it for. Let me check to make sure that's turned on, by the way. I will, it will be turned into, turn it in, which will do a plagiarism test. It'll also do a AI test. So if you have a paragraph that you wrote from AI and you just copied it as AI, the project will find that. And if you do that, you should put it in quotes and then say where you got it from, and then it's not plagiarizing. But if you just include it and don't put it in quotes and say where you got it from, you're plagiarizing the AI. Let me look that up to make sure it's going to be graded by turn it in. I just want to make sure it's actually turned on because, yeah, it has to be turn it in. And so we'll go through turn it in similarity tool to figure out the index. And you should get a score immediately as soon as you turn it in. Um, that is why I've knocked off the what was I going to talk about? Should get a score immediately. Oh, that's why I've turned off PDF files. Make sure a PDF file is not going to be accepted. So this document has to be a docx, rich text format, and I'll let a write format be all right also. The reason is turn it in sometimes cannot check a PDF document, and for some reason, sometimes they can. I don't know why it is that way, but I've shut off. You cannot submit it as a PDF formatted document. You can submit it. I don't have that rich text format right again. Your word processor should be able to save it as a rich text format. Yeah, I'm glad I checked that because, like I said, it wasn't rich text format. RTX, I don't even know what RTX is. It's not rich text format. So, um, and that way it can be checked for plagiarism. And I also check if you have a paragraph that you just quoted from AI. In fact, even a sentence, you should put it in quotes and say where you got it from if you got it from AI. Remember, if you use more than 3 words of somebody else's that's not yours, 3 consecutive words, I should say, and you don't put it in quotes and say where you got it from, that's plagiarism. And I'll be a little more lenient as long as it's a sentence. It'll be fine as long as it's quoted in a sentence and you give a reference, an in-text reference. All right, any questions about any of that? You'll get a penalty if it's plagiarism. If the paper is largely plagiarized, you'll get 0 out of 75 points. A minor plagiarism, I'll figure out what the penalty will be. Generally, I don't have students plagiarizing in this project, but occasionally I've had students who get the paragraph about their unknown from someplace and then they just copy it and put it in which case that's plagiarism, the source, and um, that's a major plagiarism too. So don't do that. You should write everything in your own words. Wherever you don't, you should put it in quotes and say where you got it from. Let's talk a little bit about the grading. Let's go ahead and go. This is talking about the grading here. Let's go to the exact grading. Excuse me, here I'm going to sneeze. I'll probably sneeze later, but I've blocked the sneeze for a moment. Um, oh. You will be graded on the utilization of resources with any excess media used or an irrelevant test performed. If none, you get 10 out of 10. If you have one media you didn't need to use, or a test that was irrelevant, didn't give you any data to help you identify the species, it'll be 1, it'll be 8 out of 10. 2, 6 out of 10, etc. Down to 5 extra, a 0 out of 10. Was dichotomous logic used? If there's no excess test and dichotomous logic is used, you get 10 out of 10. If you request 2 tests at one time, you get 7 out of 10. If you request all the tests at one time, shotgun approach, you get 3 out of 10. No logic used in your test request is 0 out of 10. Were all the relevant tests used, most students will get no tests omitted, 10 out of 10. However, if you do not finish the project, some students do wait to the very end and then start requesting tests. If you need to do one more test to identify your species, you get 8 out of 10. Omitted. 2 tests omitted, you get 6 out of 10, etc. Were the correct species included at each step? If all species were correct, you get 10 out of 10. If there was one species incorrect any place in your lab report, meaning any day you gave the results of a test and then stated what species were under consideration, you'll get 8 out of 10. If you have 2 to 3 species incorrect, you get 6 out of 10. If you have over 5 incorrect species, or you simply did not include the species under consideration, you get 2 out of 10. Completeness of report was all the information presented, 10 out of 10. If you left something out of your document, like you didn't have the in-text citations and you should have, meaning you quoted someone, you didn't put it in the text citation, that's one instance of missing information. Let me get out of there. Another case is if you don't have the full references, that's one instance of missing information. If you don't have the table detailing how you identified your species and you don't have the references, the full references, you get 6 out of 10, etc. If the grammar, the English, the spelling, and the punctuation are all good, meaning excellent, you get 15 out of 15. If you have a few, very few errors, but the logic is understood, you get 13 out of 15. If you have some errors, but the logic is still understood, you get 11 out of 15. If you have some errors and some of them are not understood, meaning your logic is not understood, you get 7 out of 15. You have lots of errors in the paper is hard to read, you get 1 out of 15. If you identify the species correctly, you'll get 10 out of 10. If you get the species and it's close, meaning it's within the same group or type of cells, you get 7 out of 10. If it's outside the group of the species, it actually is, but the gram stain is correct, you get 5 out of 10. If you identify the species and the gram stain is incorrect, you get 0 out of 10 for a total of 75 points. Any questions about this project or how it's going to be graded? All right, I've got a few other things to talk about. The unknown notes pages will close on November 28th. So that would be the last day you can request a test. If you request a test on November 28th, it'll have to be a test that you can get the results in 1 day or less because the project is going to be closed on November 29th. So the last day to submit the report is 11:59 p.m., November 29th. This project will take 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how lucky you are and how quickly you can identify the unknown, but 2 to 3 weeks, and you should get started right away. Some students wait to the very end, and these are always the students who do not finish the report on time. Some of the students who wait to the end also request all the tests at once, which I will allow, but you're going to get a penalty because this project is supposed to be following dichotomous logic. Anyways, the unknown notes pages closes. Where is it? November 28th. And then the project will close November 29th. All right, I've shown you the grading rubric. I talked about the unknown notes pages. I've talked about the species list as well as the tests. Let me talk a little bit about the building a dichotomous game plan. You need to follow a dichotomous game plan for this project. You should be using dichotomous logic, where you're separating everything into yes or no or something like that. And if you need problems, if you don't understand dichotomous logic, there's 2 places you can read about it. You can go through this building a dichotomous game plan, and near the end of the document, it goes through a dichotomous game plan where you have an unknown cell, which can be A, B, C, or D, and you're following dichotomous logic. You're going to say, is the cell white or not white? And if it's white, it's A. It's not white, it's B, C, or D. And let's say it's B, C, or D. What the heck happened there? We don't have that example again. Let's go ahead and start the example again. A, B, C, or D. We're going to say it's rectangular or not rectangular. If it's rectangular, it's A or B. A or B. Not rectangular, C or D. And it's not C or D, so we're going to cross that out and follow rectangular A or B. And then we have, is it white or not white? If it's white, it's species B. If it's not white, it's species A. And that's following dichotomous logic, where you start with all the examples, split them down, and then split them down again. And there's an example in here at the very end, so you can go through that. And also on the last page of the instructions, it goes through dichotomous logic. I'll get back to that. I forgot about that. Going through a dichotomous example. You can go through this if you want, if you need help on following dichotomous logic, but you do not need to turn these questions in. So if you're perfectly comfortable with dichotomous logic, you do not need to answer these questions and turn it in or go through this example. Let me state that you should go through the act of streaking out your unknown bacteria for a colony isolation, getting an isolated colony, picking cells from that isolated colony, and then streaking it on a second plate to get isolated colonies, and then pick cells from the cells that have gone through 2 colony isolation events to set up your stock culture, because that's likely to be a pure culture. Over 95% chance that it will be a pure culture. You should go through that in your unknown notes pages and in your unknown report. because that's something you do in the lab, and we're pretending that you're in a real lab. So you should go out and streak out your bacteria, your unknown bacteria, to make sure it's a pure culture. So we're virtually doing this because you can't really do it. Any question about any of that? All right. Um, one more thing to talk about, and that is an example. The sample journal is an example of a lab report. I'm going to go use it from my document because it'll be displaying better and easier to see as well as move through the document. You should have your name, Travis Kubota, the year, the class, and the unknown number, identification of unknown number 6. This should be at the top of the document of your text. It should not be on a cover page. I used to print these out, in which case you'd be wasting page if you put it on a cover page, but should be just on top of the text. You should every day have a date for what you did on that day. You may have on that day, if you had previous results, an observation. Obviously, you don't have an observation on the first day, because on the first day, it looks like they're just streaking out some plates for isolating the colony. And then on day 2, they're looking at the isolated colonies they got on the plate. So that's an observation. There's some activities they're doing on this plate. It looks like he took from colony B and streaked it out on a second plate to get isolated colonies. Where is colony B? Someplace over here. This got moved, so it's probably right there, but I'm not sure. Or maybe it's there. And then day 3, looked at the plates, so that's the observation. The activities he did today is he selected cells from one colony and colony B, probably there, and used them to inoculate 2 TSA slants to set up the stock culture. And then he'll use the stock culture to run every future test, meaning use those cells. So on day 4, he looked at the stock cultures to make sure they're growing and stated what they look like. So that's the observation. He then ran his first test on day 4, where he did the gram stain. And then he's got the results of the day, where the gram stain is purple cells and they're small spheres, like right there. So that's the result. And then the conclusion, it appears he has gram-positive cocci. So your lab report should have, on some days, an observation if you have a previous test or something to talk about, the activities you did on that day, and then if you get the results and conclusions on that day, you can have that on this day. Most of the tests you'll be starting on this day, so you have an activity, but you will not have results and conclusions for that test on that day because most tests need to incubate for 2 days before you'll get the results and conclusions. So day 5, he had no observations because he did the gram stain, so there's nothing to look at on day 5, but he decided to do the catalase test. So he ran the catalase test as the activity. And on this test, you get the results right away. He doesn't say what the results are, but he should have that as a result. And that is he saw bubbling immediately. And then the conclusions is catalase positive. And then he went on to state for the species he's looking at, that means it's either a member of family Staphylococcus or Micrococcus. I think that's true for the species you're looking at, but you do have a few more species than he had looking at. So it might be, it could be another family, but it's probably just those two. And then he excluded family Streptococcus as well as family Enterococcus, because it's catalase. Those are all catalase negative. You don't need to say which ones you excluded, but you should narrow down the possibilities. And he stated family Staphylococcus and Micrococcus. And when you get it down below the family, you should put down what the species possibly could be. So the possible species after the pigment test is Staphylococcus aureus, Micrococcus luteus, or what is it, Micrococcus varians? Because all three of them are pigmented. All right, any questions about the sample journal? Use the sample journal to help you write the report. You should not use the sample journal really until you get ready to write the report, but you should be writing similar to what's in this sample journal. Like I said, it will be a little different because we're doing it online. You should have the table in here. It would be best if you didn't put Staphylococcus epidermidis in here because it's excluded. And Enterococcus faecalis should be excluded because none of these tests are positive for Enterococcus faecalis. And then actually, right here, when he did beta hemolysis, he narrowed it down to one species, which was his unknown. And after you've identified your unknown, you can do one confirmation test. So you could do the biolesculin test. And he did two confirmation tests. If you do two confirmation tests, you will get a penalty, meaning once you've identified your unknown, you're only allowed to do one further confirmation test. Any question about any of that? All right. Then he's got a paragraph about his organism. He identified Staphylococcus aureus, talking about it. He should probably have an index citation for where he got this information from. And then he's got references. He got this information from Staphylococcus aureus and his textbook, which was Bauman at the time, which obviously isn't correct. I must have put these references in here to help you with the document because I've got 2020 and he did this report in 2004. So I put in the references probably. So I need to put in an index citation also. Any question about any of that? Let me see if I can do that right now. Oops. There, now I have the index citation in there. All right, any questions about this project? Hopefully I've discussed everything. Um, did I mention I do want you to make it at least 12-point font? Did I mention that?
Yes, you did.
Okay. All right, great. I think I've discussed everything. Are there any questions? All right, that's it. I will see you in the lecture. Bye.